Layla, when I was asked to do this interview, I did not expect it to be one of the toughest interviews I've ever had.
You may know of him as a riot on Twitter. He spares no one. But did you know he's an economist and is also the executive director of the Caribbean Policy Research Institute? I'm Layla Harding, and my guest in this episode of our Child Month interview series is Dr. Damien King. Hi, Dr. King. Thanks for talking with me.
Hi, Layla. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, you're an economist. Weren't you afraid of math and numbers as a child? And when did you know you wanted to become an economist?
I did economics. I was introduced to economics in sixth form at Campion. And within weeks of learning economics for the first time, I realized that I had found my calling.
Economics play a big part in education. Some kids go to school without breakfast. Some join the track team because it guarantees a meal. What can be done to keep children well-fed and in school?
That's a great question, because it really gets at the heart of what economics is about. Economics is about not only how much and what we produce, but who gets it. And so we need to do two things to make sure that children get a good education, or have the health and the circumstances to be able to pay attention to their education. The first thing is to ensure that we have an economy where individuals and businesses can take advantage of all the opportunities that exist. So we end up producing as many goods and services as we can. We are as productive as we can be. But more importantly than that is the part about who ends up getting it. So we have to put in place what economists call a social safety net. And what they mean by that is that those families that end up having fewer opportunities, or they fall on hard times temporarily, still are able to access the basics like food and shelter. So as a society, we need to ensure that we can get a little bit of income, a little bit of money to those who are doing the worst in society, so that they can have enough to feed their children, send them to school, and pay for their school supplies.
Speaking of school, what's your take on principals blocking students from class because of hairstyles, dress length, or the wrong color shoes?
Schools have uniforms because uniformity is important. Uniformity is a social leveler. So it's not obvious who is coming from a wealthy background and who is coming from a poorer household. And that's good for the social and personal development of the children in school. It also teaches students that there is a benefit to being part of a society where everybody is the same. However, it doesn't mean that uniformity should be imposed to the point where any form of individual expression is completely ruled out. And hairstyle is a form of individual expression. It might be a form of not just style and fashion, but individual religion. So I think principals have to be careful not to go too far in imposing uniformity and to try to try to stop every expression of individuality and creativity, because then you don't end up with adults who can exercise autonomy and creativity and produce the music and art that we celebrate and like so much.
My parents say you're a real fire starter on Twitter. Now, I'm not on Twitter, but why are you such a set-on? And how much do you enjoy your social media persona?
Layla, when I was asked to do this interview, I did not expect it to be one of the toughest interviews I've ever had. So, but it's turning out to be that way. I see my role not just on social media, but in the public sphere as having to add value. I ask myself the question, why do I get the benefit of having an audience, of having a microphone? It's not because I'm smarter than anybody. It's not because I'm wiser than anybody. It's because I happen to have a body of knowledge, economics, that can help people to understand what's going on around them. And so I feel an obligation to use all of those circumstances and audiences to add value to people's lives. So mainly my Twitter is about helping people to understand economic developments and understand what is happening in the country. I occasionally try to use more engaging commentary in order to, keep the audience engaged.
My brother and I have a piggy bank and we're always saving. Did you have a savings pen growing up? And do you think financial literacy should be taught as a subject as early as primary and prep schools?
Financial literacy is incredibly important. And the earlier one starts learning about it, the better. And it's great to hear that you're building your savings from now, because what is important to an economy in this respect is also what's important to an individual, which is that the key to increasing your economic circumstances is saving and investing. And so starting early and maintaining a savings rate as you go into adulthood and further into adulthood is an excellent idea, both for the individual and for the economy as a whole.
Speaking of growing up, Dr. King, were you a member of any clubs or teams in school? And what's your favorite childhood memory?
I was a member of the cricket team, and I was a member of the debating club. My favorite childhood memory is any experience I had that represented not individual achievement, but achievement by the group, achievement by a team. So I very much enjoyed being on a team. And when I was on my high school cricket team and we won a game, then I felt good to be part of contributing to something larger.
My mom is always saying, the children are our future and a child shall lead them. But so many children are losing their future to crime. How can we save our children?
Well, first of all, your mom is right. Certainly about children being the future. Not so sure about, me being a fire starter on Twitter. But crime, from one perspective, is an economic choice that individuals make. That when they look at the opportunities presented by crime versus the opportunities presented by legal economic activity, the one presented by crime looks more enticing. The rewards may seem to be greater, and the risk may seem to be lower than it really is. And so one of the ways that we can do something about crime is to try to make the rewards less lucrative and to increase the risk of not being successful. And so people are going to sort of do that, cost-benefit calculation and realize that a lawful life is a better choice.
A recent Gleaner story said many students in Clarendon weren't showing up for classes and weren't submitting SBAs. How can we fix children broken by the pandemic?
The first step in doing so is recognizing what an enormous loss it is. We pretended that learning was going on, but remotely. And when you look at the number of students that just didn't have the circumstances and the means to be able to participate in education remotely, didn't have a proper space at home to be able to focus on what was happening, on the screen, didn't have devices, didn't have reliable internet connection, didn't have the family support to impose the discipline of showing up, and plus the mere limitations of remote learning, the education loss during that period was massive. So the first thing is to recognize the extent of the education loss. And doing so will mean that we need to be putting now a huge amount of resources into making up for it. Not just, seeing who comes back and presuming that they are where they would have been before. So we need to put more resources into the schools themselves and into the communities to get the children to re-engage and to make up for the loss that has taken place.
I find that hobbies are very important. They keep the mind active. Activities with the hands are important too, from playing in mud to sewing to playing a musical instrument. Do you have hobbies, Dr. King? And what's the craziest thing most people don't know about you?
Hobbies are really important, and physical activity is really important. Children, as they grow and develop, need to be engaged in all spheres of their life, not just the acquisition of academic knowledge, but in terms of their physical dexterity and tangible engagement, tangible meaning touching things, and their cultural and creative development. So it's an excellent perspective you have. In terms of my own activities, I too like to take a break from my mostly mental and intellectual activities by being creative. So I spend a lot of my recreational time being creative, interior decor, designing layouts. And the craziest thing that I've ever done is I jumped out of an airplane. Doing a skydive was something I'd always wanted to do. People talk about having a bucket list, things you have to do before you die. And the only one thing I had in mind was to jump out of an airplane. And I got the chance to do it several years ago when I was introduced to somebody, and they were telling me what they do for a living, and he said, well, he works at a skydiving place. And I said, well, lucky me, because that's something I want to do. And so I linked up with him and I got to jump out of a plane. It was the most exciting moment of my life. Also the most terrifying.
I believe that if there were proper parks, there could be fewer children going astray at an early age and less crime. Is that something CAPRI could study?
CAPRI has studied that, and your instincts are correct. Having public spaces, having places put aside where citizens can come and engage with each other and go for a walk, sit and listen to the birds, is incredibly important to the development of a society. We have evidence that public spaces not only raise the value of properties that are nearby, it reduces the stress levels of the citizens who live nearby and have access to public spaces. Having public spaces even has been shown in other countries to reduce the crime rate.
I'm 12 years old. If you could go back to my age and give yourself advice, What would you say to a 12-year-old Damien?
That's a really tough question. I would say that while you always want to pay attention to school and studying because you're giving yourself the skills to be able to develop yourself through life, while you want to pay attention to your friends because having social skills is important to your personal development, I would say to a 12-year-old Damien and to all 12-year-olds that having a strong sense of values, what is important, what is right, and even when you have the opportunity to make a decision that's going to feel good in the moment, but it's not the right thing to do, get in the habit from 12, 13, 14, 15, 20, 30, 40 of always behaving in a way that if everybody sees what you are doing, you're not ashamed of yourself.
When you were growing up, but you didn't know you wanted to be an economist? Like, no. What did you want to be, if you remember?
Well, I do remember. Anybody asked me, I said I wanted to be a lawyer. And this is something you need to watch out for. Nobody at the age of 12 should decide what they want to be in life. Or 13 or 14 or 15 or 16 or 24 or 25. Because the society, your parents, your uncles and aunts, your school, keep asking you, what are you going to be when you have no idea what the options are? It's like giving a multiple choice test. You only sit A and B, and you don't know that the possible answers go all the way down to Z. When you're in high school, you know like 4 professions. You know, doctor, lawyer, and what your parents do.
My dad's a music producer.
Okay, so you just don't know what the options are, and most people pick one of those. You know, they pick doctor, they pick lawyer, or they pick what their parents do. And there are hundreds of thousands of professions. You have search engine optimizer, you have plant pathologist, you have life coaches. And before you decide, you need to know what the options are and what you're good at and what you like. I didn't know about economists until I happened to take a course, and I just took to it. So I would advise, teenagers to try not to answer that question. Or if you give an answer to adults who keep asking you, in your mind, you remain agnostic, you remain open. So you go to university and you take as broad a range of courses as you can. So you can sample different disciplines and different sciences and different areas of knowledge.
Yeah.
And when you pick a major, don't think that you're picking a career, because you're not. Nobody who's over the age of 35 is working in the area of your undergraduate major. So just view it as data gathering. And when you finish your degree, your first job is not your career either. It's data gathering. So after you get to, your mid-20s, then you start to have some ideas of what you like and what you are good at and what you want to spend your time doing. And then you can start thinking about a career choice. So I would that's the best advice I have for you.
Before we go, I actually have a gift for you, and I think you'll want to open it now.
Okay. So I don't have to wait until it's my birthday?
No.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Dr. King, and congrats on your new assignment in our healthcare sector. I heard the health minister saying you'll lead a review on how healthcare is funded in Jamaica. It was a pleasure interviewing you, and I learned a lot.
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is not to deal with the minister's request to think about financing healthcare in Jamaica, but to go and clean my shoes, since all of Twitterdom now knows that I had difficulty finding shoe polish. And then once I get that done, then I'm going to turn to the minister's request. And thank you very much. I enjoyed this interview.
And that's all the time we have for this episode in our Child Month interview series. It was great talking with you, Dr. King. And thanks a lot to the University of the West Indies for hosting. I'm Layla Harding. Thanks for watching.